Welcome to Snark Chocolate, a show about ZK products where we break them down with rich flavors and sweet insights. My name is Omer and I'll be co-hosting this episode with Queenie. Today, we are thrilled to be joined by Daniel Benarroch, founder and CEO at Inverse cryptographic R&D team building the future infrastructure for the open internet. We are looking forward to hearing about what it's like to be at the forefront of privacy tech. So Daniel, great to have you here. Can you please introduce yourself and your company?
Yeah, thank you so much, Omer and Queenie. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. So as Omer said, I'm Daniel Benarroch. I've had about 8 years or so in the space. Started, in 2014 with a master's in cryptography and kind of never looked back. And we started Inverse Tech around like a year and a half ago. Actually, almost 2 years now. It's crazy how fast the year goes by. And we've been really focusing on sort of trying to support different companies that we have kind of strong belief in, that they are important companies, that they're doing meaningful impact, and making sure that their products and their systems and protocols actually have, support the right cryptography kind of thing, secure manner, and so on. We are mostly focused on privacy, but not only. We are also working with Scroll, for example, to kind of help them build and design their latest ZKVM. So kind of scalability is kind of also a big topic. General programmability. We tend to think of ourselves kind of like focusing on three different verticals, if you wish. One of them is kind of like security, so just making sure that all the cryptography is secure, thinking about how to make it even better, even with formal verification systems. Another one is kind of programmability and everything that comes with it. So how do we make it more user-friendly? How do we make it more also secure in the context of, allowing people, the regular developers, to build programmable systems in privacy? And cryptography is not always easy, even if the ZKVM or EVM is actually secure. And the third one is really like identity. Like we've been also collaborating with Worldcoin on their whole biometric matching system, and we can talk a bit more about that. But in general, I think identity has a huge potential for shaping and shifting kind of the way that the digital world and the internet is really built and how we interact with it. Today we have a team of about 10 people. We're growing. I have a co-founder, Aurélien Nicolas. We've been working together in previous projects also for about 5 years or so. So we're very excited to be building this and hoping to continue contributing.
Great answer and great intro. So I know you are big into cryptography for a long time now, and I guess like maybe taking one step back, um, I'm interested to know what got you to decide to start a new business around cryptography instead of just blending in with some existing cryptography-centric product company.
Hmm. Great question. So actually, I started my career after the master's degree at Kedit, a company building we used to build enterprise products in the space of zero knowledge and also MPC, like we built a few products. And I think like from that experience, it was, I always say that it was kind of like, it was better than an MBA for me. Like I basically did a PhD on, startup creation in the cryptography space. And it was really interesting to see how much, first of all, we were really early. And so every client call that we were having ended up kind of overviewing in an educational manner what was cryptography. And then really seeing how much like the different features we were adding or things we were doing. We built a product on sort of private asset transfer for, central banks and, large exchanges. And we did really cool work in POCs, if it was with JP Morgan or with the Singapore Authority, et cetera, et cetera. But we kind of realized at some point that cryptography is not the product, right? Just like AI is not the product, or at least wasn't the product until ChatGPT kind of thing. But for the first decade or more of any emergent, really impactful technology, you cannot sell that as the product, right? Like you need to introduce it or include it or integrate it into a product that actually gives value to the user. And so we realized that, and it's been challenging. Even today, it's challenging to think about an actual product that is really solving, that contains cryptography, and that is really solving a need, right? Because we as technologists and entrepreneurs in the space, we like to tell ourselves that privacy is super important, and we need to go all the way and whatnot, and cryptography is the way. But the truth is that people don't really care about privacy. Like there is not that real awareness and education, right? Like so we need to really look at kind of the horse in the teeth, right? I don't know how you say that expression in English, to be honest, but we need to really look at the reality on the ground. And I think the other side of it is really that aspect of what is the business model, right? Like I kept asking myself the question, and having been in this space basically since inception of Ethereum and Zcash, I can say that it's very few companies have managed to actually find a business model that is not based on token speculation or token funding as ICOs or something around like transaction fees, which maybe it's going to be long term, but maybe not. And so I think like there is definitely a place to, for us where when we created Inverse, we said, we have good ideas, we have interesting thoughts and potential projects to build on. We have the expertise, but it's not clear that it's something that we want to sort of marry to, right? Like in both in the context of is it solving an actual problem and does it have a sustainable business model, right? So that was really kind of the way to go for us, believing that we have the expertise, we can build a good company. And I think for me the other side was like really kind of coming from a place of kind of my own emotional and sort of spiritual journey, looking at the culture in different companies in the space and realizing that we can do better. So I really think of Inverse as a good example for potentially building that kind of a sandbox space. I'll tell you more about what we're doing in that. It's really cool.
Amazing. Actually, let's hear more about what you guys are doing. You mentioned Scroll, and your website also mentioned a few interesting partners. Maybe you can elaborate more from what you can about past projects or current um, projects you guys are focused on.
Yeah, definitely. So I think like we really like kind of offer services, quote unquote, in like the whole breadth of what you could call professional services or consulting or R&D kind of support. We solve the research problems. So we worked with Zcash. The Zcash Foundation actually contracted us to do a bit of a survey and research on the state of private programmability. And really, essentially, we wrote a paper. It's published in the ePrint. I think we also published it in either Financial Crypto or one of these. And the key point there was sort of really looking at how there isn't a sort of unified framework for thinking about these things and sort of how to do private programmability. And so we designed that, like we basically came up with a framework that allowed us to talk about these protocols that exist. And it was really just in three phases. Like the first phase is kind of thinking of like the private inputs that are kind of individual. So when you're using these protocols in applications that only require your inputs, right? Like you can prove something about your identity, something about your asset ownership, right? Like transactions, all of this is really just you and the network validating. And that we call the individual computation, the independent computation phase. And then we have the secondary phase is the mediated computation. And this is kind of applications where you're already like aggregating inputs from different parties, right? So you can think about exchanges, swaps, even like things like voting, although voting is a little bit tricky, but and there's plenty of other more that come in and auctions and so on. And you need to basically aggregate these inputs. And zero knowledge is not really enough there. So people are thinking of FHE or MPC, but the truth is that most people that are doing these, that are trying to solve these problems, are just adding like some kind of third-party system, even if it's like a decentralized kind of third-party system that has some signature threshold, kind of like consensus-based stuff, and that leaks privacy to the actual coordinators, and it can have a risk. So we really advocate for kind of that MPC direction. And the third one is just like the global computation. It's kind of like, okay, now you've computed all these things, you've generated some kind of proofs. Can you like put it up, right? And that was like the Zcash project. Is really cool. Definitely recommend checking out there's a couple of talks about it. And then we engaged with Worldcoin about a year ago and have been working with them to basically kind of secure their matching system in terms of privacy. So there's been a few publications. There's a paper on this. Essentially we're using an MPC system to create a shares of that database of the biometrics that are all encrypted, and basically every time you have a new incoming biometric, you want to match across this database, find a match, and so we do that now with MPC. And what we're actually adding is a form of scalability that is based on a kind of like a vector database, or like graph-like structure that allows you to find like nearest vectors, k nearest vectors kind of algorithms. And we also do that in MPC, which is really cool. And we can see a huge scalability on that. And then we're also working with Scroll, as I said. So with Scroll, we've actually been working with them in the context of Seno, which is their newly proposed ZKVM protocol. It's a little bit different than the existing ZKVM protocols. I mean, it's based on RISC-V, but it's also it uses GKR proving system. They also do a little bit of a kind of fragmentation of the actual program on some kind of like heuristics in order to generate several proofs and not have a huge program that you're running through a single kind of circuit. So it's really interesting stuff. I think there's a lot of potential in all of these projects. We're very excited to see both of these projects actually going into production. So Scroll is not there yet, but we're doing some really cool tests. And we hope to have more projects that we can collaborate with, for sure.
Can you take us into the process of working with other teams? How does it look like? How do you support them? What's the length of a project? Is there anything that kind of like you see in common in the way that you collaborate with different products?
Yeah, definitely. So I think like our kind of objective or key kind of requirement for working with different projects is to say like, we don't want to join a project for 3 months and then sort of like get out, right? Like that's not what we're in here. We're here to accompany the product and to actually contribute to it kind of more in a long-term way. So we prioritize projects that can, go for a year plus, 6 months at least, etc. And I think the key component for us, or the key aspect of really being able to contribute meaningfully to a project, sort of, is to be able to own a specific track in the project, in the product development and the research, right? So that way we can sort of really maintain our work culture in the company, which means that the employees are actually happy to be, where they are, and they're not sort of feeling like they work for a different company while being contracted by someone else, right? But also because it really allows us to bring out that sort of creative dynamic that we cultivate, right, in the company, right? So when we build a team, we maybe have like 3-4 people in the team. They work together really well. And if we're going to join a project in a way that, there's 4 people in our team, but actually they're really just individually contributing to the project, then it loses a little bit the essence of what we really want to contribute on, right? So I think like that's a bit of a challenge. Some companies are not fully kind of aligned with that because they just feel like they just want to add numbers to their engineering teams. But we definitely try to push for that because I think it's the best way to go and to contribute from our perspective. I think in general, once the sort of needs of the client are well established, because a lot of times they also come and they're like, well, we need something, but we don't really know exactly. But we dig deeper, we understand what are the exact requirements. We are flexible in that we understand that in these research processes and engineering processes, sometimes the requirements or the priorities may change. So we can set a scope at the beginning, but we're also understandable that the scope may change and fluctuate, and so we want to make sure to adapt because at the end of the day we're here for the client. And so there's like all these parameters that we try to take into account. Sometimes the project is has a fixed budget, and then you need to sort of go for an extension time that is maybe unpaid or something, and we need to balance that as well. Other times the projects are more based on sort of like retainer kind of basis. So we work every month and we contribute in different ways and we agree on what's going on for the next couple of months ahead. So there's definitely a variety of ways to engage in this project, and I think the important part for us is really to be flexible and open minded about this. That's the best way to get to work with the right people in this space.
Before moving on, I still want to like double click on the same topic because I find it really fascinating and trying to understand if you guys developed any sort of like internal tooling or some kind of like toolbox to handle with these projects. Like what are the commonalities? Meaning that I can understand why teams specialized in applied cryptography can become useful to many product teams. I mean, this is a skill which is hard to come by, and mistakes are critical. You don't want to gamble, like you want to leave it to professionals. Still, I mean, something here that I want to understand better is the way or how you guys operate um, within a project within a project like end to end. Do you know what I mean? Like how do you um, approach a project and analyze their need? Um, do you need to apply some kind of methodology? Do you have some discipline in the company to handle this? How do you do this like process?
It's not very formalized. I think it comes a lot more from sort of having like the two or three individuals in the company that have like a lot of experience doing these kind of projects, having really worked with like many different types of cryptographic systems, and doing the research, implementing and deploying, and sort of really being able to identify where things can go wrong from a very intuitive place, right? So when we're having the first conversations, until we don't understand fully what the project is about, like in detail, what are they expecting us to do, or what they want from this interaction, we don't really like start the project. That's like the first thing. Like we need to really understand. And I think in general, when it comes to like, for example, like security of the systems, well, first of all, like no one can build some cryptographic system and put a stamp and validate 100% that this is fully secure, right? Like you need to do audits, you need to make sure that these things are revised and reviewed by many eyes. Many times, we are the first set of eyes. We share the work among the company and make sure that the PRs are reviewed properly. Then the client has their own engineers who many times have the capacity to at least review and give some potential feedback there. But they definitely all do audits before deploying these systems. Um, and just in general, like we have kind of our own way of like project management in the company. We do like to make sure that even if there's like two or three teams in the company that are working on different projects, there is at least like one or two people that are sort of very aware of all of these projects, both to make sure that there is no sort of like the bubble effect for anyone in a given project, but also because it's interesting to see that sometimes there's commonalities or questions that arise somewhere and maybe they're relevant for other projects. So we have our own sort of project management, and we make sure that like there is also the feeling, right? Like how do we feel the client? Like are they moving forward on different directions? Are we still aligned on what are the goals? We do a check-in. I mean, every week we have check-ins with our clients, so that's definitely a way to maintain the communication. It's very important. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of coordination that needs to happen so that we're making sure we're overlapping at every level and stage of the project. We don't want to let anything fall between the cracks.
Yeah, this is interesting. I guess that the analogy I'm trying, like the mental model I have is, when you want to build a website, so you pay to a company that is specializing in building websites or mobile app. The way what I feel from here is that this is like similar in some ways, but there are some complexities also here that happen here. One area of complexity that I'm curious to learn more about is how do you guys stay up to date, right? As a company that in a field which is evolving very fast, and you do need to apply cutting edge cryptography, MPC, ZK. How do you keep the team aware to recent advancements in the technology?
That's a great question. I think like the simplest answer to that is really like every project has a specific requirement for that state of the art in a specific direction. And so we will do a deep dive. That's kind of always part of the initial onboarding on the project. We always have like, two weeks to a month where we're like, let's make sure we're up to date, with whatever papers are relevant, all the kind of adjacent technology that we can use, the specific questions that are maybe unsolved, and are there any pointers or references that we can already like pull and start building ideas on top of that. Any code bases that are out there, if they're open source, if it's like the clients or proprietary or whatever that we can have access to. All of that is definitely a big part of going into a project. And of course, for us, it's very valuable to do these projects also in the context of how much it teaches the company, right? Like this kind of IP acquisition through the projects is very important. So we also have kind of specific people that have more expertise in MPC, or more expertise in zero knowledge, or more expertise in FHE. We actually have like a PhD in each one of these, right? So that's a very powerful way of building the company. And then we have, engineers that are very good engineers in cryptography and security. And we also have engineers that have other specific like niche expertise. And just generally, we also have engineers that are like just really good Rust engineers, right? Like that help push through the deployment, integration, all the kind of like non-cryptographic work that happens when you're building a product. And so we also have, our kind of internal seminars. We go to conferences. Like we really like encourage the team to go to conferences as well. Everybody has their own, routine as to how they, stay connected to the interesting aspects of the industry that they find useful and they want to keep up as well. So for sure, it's a challenge, but we try our best. It's also such a big industry, right? Like just generally, even like zero knowledge is huge. MPC is huge and FHE is huge. Like how do you keep up with three? You can't. Like the answer is you really can't be on top of everything. But we catch up when needed on a specific like small diagonal, right, of this whole industry.
Sounds like a team full of MVPs.
We are proud. We are very proud of how we built this team. Actually, it's really cool. We're very excited to work together.
Yeah. By the way, are there any recent advancements that have surprised you the most in this space?
Any advancements that have surprised me the most? That's a really good question. I think this work on sort of scaling in a private way as a search problem, let's say, like really the core of that contribution that we're doing in the Worldcoin project to the MPC matching protocol, they call it the MPC, and it's this protocol that we kind of built. We didn't fully design it. It's a problem. It's an algorithm called HNSW, hierarchical navigable small worlds, and it's like an algorithm that's used a lot in like the AI world to sort of map databases in a way that is easily accessible and you can trace different entries and whatnot. It's a graph database, a vector database, and then on top of that there is a key search for k nearest algorithms, right? And then the question was like, okay, can we? So we saw immediately that like on sort of plain text data, it was really scalable, right? Like it really helped you. We kind of bring down the size of these biometric codes and these iris codes and sort of like do a filtering version. And then on the k nearest vectors, we are able to then find a match with doing like exhaustive search. But you're doing exhaustive search on thousands and not hundreds of millions, right, of entries. And when we're doing this in a private way, we need to implement this whole HNSW inside of the MPC. Like, how do we do this? There's different questions that come up. And, a lot of people will kind of right away kind of think of, PIR or PSI, private information retrieval or private site intersection as sort of similar kind of protocols. But actually the actual kind of model is really different. Like PIR is kind of saying like, well, there is a private database somewhere and some different party is trying to retrieve information, right? Like where you don't want the owner of the database to know what information it is. And private set intersection is also saying sort of like two different entities have sets and then you want to find the intersection. But like, it's not really that. Here what happens is that the owner of the database, which is actually decentralized, so there's not even a single owner anymore, because that was the point of using privacy in the matching protocol, that not even Worldcoin has access to the actual iris codes, is that when someone is coming in, if there is not a match, right, no intersection, they need to add this encrypted entry into the database. So it's not just about finding the intersection. It's like I actually need your entry as well. So it's a whole different model, right? Like it's not the same. So I was actually it felt really a really cool problem to work on, and I don't think there's been that much work around that. So we're hoping to publish a paper at some point, whenever we get the time to write the paper. But yeah.
Fantastic. So can this new technology enable any new types of applications on top of Worldcoin, or basically it just improve its tech stack?
Well, it definitely improves the tech stack. I think on top of Worldcoin, I mean, the technology can definitely be used for other use cases. Anything that requires some kind of private search. I think biometrics are definitely like generally speaking a big kind of user of this application, of this protocol. But I'm sure there's others, right? Even in sort of financial systems or probably like health systems. We actually are in contact with a team that is actually a health company that is building software for underdeveloped countries. And I'm super excited and bullish about their company and potentially getting into some kind of work together to help them really secure that system of biometrics. And one of the challenges there is like, how do I find that a 5-year-old kid in an underdeveloped country actually took a vaccine a couple of years ago or not, right? So you need to search in these databases. So it's definitely a potential application there for sure.
Can't wait to read the paper when it's ready. Yeah.
For sure.
So Daniel, now I want to hear what you're building in the sandbox you just mentioned in the very beginning.
Got it. Good. Yeah, I love that. Good. So what I was explaining before, right, is that from the get-go, we really cared about the culture of the company. Like we really wanted to emphasize that, this is we're going to build an incredible place to work on. Not just because you're going to work in interesting things or you're going to do impactful work or the team is really cool to work with, you're going to learn, etc. But because we're going to, create a space that feels in a way very safe to be in, that respects your boundaries, that respects your energies, that, encourages you to pursue your own kind of wills and needs and desires. And that's a very challenging space to build because, I mean, especially in our industry, I think in tech, but like also in the crypto space, everybody's just like, oh, kind of like, I'm going to work. You do the work and then you go home, right? And then like there's this like kind of very sort of fallacy in the separation of, personal and professional life. And like we hold very close to our identity the belief that like you cannot really separate. Like your work life is your personal life and your personal life is your work life. Like this goes together, right? And so we've been hiring actual, coaches and people that are very well versed in the kind of space of wellness, mindfulness, and sort of also like culture development with companies and so on. And first of all, we've set up a coaching program. So basically, like we're investing in our employees, right, in the people working in our company, so that every one of them will have a specific coach dedicated for them. And this is not sort of to like help you solve any like conflicts inside of the company or whatever. It's like just your time. It's like literally they have 1 hour or like an hour and a half, I think, like every 2 weeks, and they can just go through their own journey. Like I have experience with therapy and with coaching, and for me, it's really been life-changing in so many ways. in the way that I show up, in the way that I lead others, or in my family with my wife, right? There's a lot of different aspects to this. And it's just been generally very powerful to see how, both the coaching and sort of this idea of making this intentional. We have once a week, we're all remote, so it's also hard to keep that, but we have once a week a kind of culture development call where we just do either like some game, or we just literally share, someone in the company built, Susan, she's great. She built like a whole set of 100 questions, and we just kind of pick a question and like just answer it, like what's a life for you? How do you want to show up this week? How do you, whatever. So it's very, very powerful. We've seen kind of quote unquote an increase in vulnerability. We've sped up that feeling of connection between everyone in the company. So even in our last kind of offsite that we had in Toronto, we had super meaningful day there. It was really powerful. We enjoyed so much being together, and we want to continue building that. So yeah, we're building a little bit that kind of framework as we go, with the help of these other coaches, as I was saying. So it's something a bit rare. Not a lot of people have done this, but yeah.
Can there be any intersection with cryptography?
That's a really good question, Queenie. Last year, we actually built an event together with ZCon, with like the Zcash Foundation. They sponsored it. Others sponsored it as well, but they were like the co-organizers sort of thing, because it was next to ZCon in Barcelona. We called it the Crypto Lounge Experience. And the idea was really to bring more of that sort of idea of presence and sort of human experience into a cryptography conference. So it was like amazing content, and a lot of people were like, wow, I learned so much. But there wasn't a single person that kind of didn't at some point express like their awe in how like different the event was. How they felt like they were connecting to others in a different way, right? Like we had, actors, we built a whole story, a fiction story about, elders of a village that have telepathic abilities. So that we brought kind of the actors of this village, and they were interacting with people in different ways. We had like tea ceremonies, we had puzzles, we had a whole treasure hunt. We brought a mentalist. I mean, it was super cool. And I think we're going to be doing it again, so heads up. It's in the cooking. We're kind of cutting the ingredients as we speak.
Let me know.
For sure.
I'll be there.
Cool. Awesome.
Back to my semi-broken mental model of a dev shop. So how would you say you are like? Or let me ask it like this: what would be a great fit to work with you? Like, what would be the ideal project for Inverse Tech? And how can you find this project? Like, what's going to be what steps you need to take to find such projects? How do you do marketing? Because with an app, you can just see it, you can feel it in a way. In your case, it's privacy tech, I guess, that you can talk, you can maybe write a paper once in a while, but how can you actually get like potential customers to go into like the real depth of your work and appreciate it?
I appreciate that question a lot. It's definitely very, very alive in our minds as well. In all honesty, I don't really have an answer. Like it's definitely kind of an open question, and I think in many ways, like life and kind of God is just throwing these projects at us, and it works really well. So the serendipity of how we are building this project is also very important to keep in mind. The ideal project, well, it's definitely a project that has kind of like tick in all of these parameters of long-term, great team, impactful, right? Meaningful project in the industry, recognized as like having potential, edge case technologies, right? Like maybe not just sort of another application on Ethereum or something like that, right? Like, and I think also, one tick that is, hard to tick, but it's also hard to tick because we haven't had enough projects to see that being ticked properly, is that we want to be able to sort of reuse some of these systems that we're implementing, right? So we implemented this MPC thing in GPUs, right? So like I think I spoke to you, Omer, back then, and we're like, are you guys doing anything with MPC GPUs? And well, no, but here's i-deas or whatever. And there is potential ways to reuse the HNSW, but probably not in the context of Scroll. But what we build in Scroll, maybe we can reuse. I mean, all of this is open source, right? Like we care very much to do this in open source ways. We prioritize projects that prioritize open source as well. So like we will probably say no to purely kind of proprietary work, unless we believe it's super impactful for whatever industry or whatever. But we haven't had that specific call to make. And just generally like an extra tick on top of that of criteria is sort of saying like, if this is a project that can sort of align with other projects in bringing us closer to sort of our vision, right? And I guess our vision is just for completeness of an answer, our vision is really like generic, but it's very much around sort of the idea of building this kind of framework of programmability that we were mentioning. So it's kind of like a ZK MPC VM, if you wish. I think some people are exploring this idea, but I don't know if there's enough. I don't think there's enough kind of work out there for anything to be said meaningfully. I think it's important.
That's actually a super strong point. We should have started with the vision, and it's interesting to hear that you have some kind of some sort of a master plan. It's like a ZK MPC VM. So maybe take it one step further. How do you envision this role or the role of this type of your vision, how it fits inside the broader like decentralization movement or Web3 blockchain ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of parts to this question, so I'll try to like make it brief as much as possible. First of all, I think the vision is very much sort of live, like it changes. It's not like set in stone in any way, especially because like we see ourselves, as like someone that comes kind of in a new room, even though we're not fully new, but like the company is kind of new and we're getting close to these companies that are doing a lot of really cool stuff. And we're analyzing, we're taking in, we're observing, right? Like we're taking to ourselves, exploring, being very curious about what's going on. And then forming ideas here and forming ideas there. We have ideas on AI, we have ideas on MPC, we have ideas on GPUs and so on. But I think like the key that is sort of missing in the space is really what I was saying earlier in the context of this question of building products that have cryptography. Is like, how do we make cryptography usable, right? Not just by developers, but also by people. Like, how do we integrate cryptography in our day-to-day flow, right? Like, and not any cryptography. I'm talking like MPC and ZK and whatnot, right? Like this is key. Apple has published recently something really cool, right? Like that they're using FHE to allow you to do kind of more on phone queries, if it's AI or if it's search on photos, etc. So that's really awesome. I'm not fully knowledgeable about the details of that, but if there is a company that can do it, it's probably Apple or Google, right? And I think they're doing it in some capacity, but I think we have a larger role to play here. And really, like, the ultimate vision is to bring these tools in a way that it is usable. So like the user experience is like solved, right? Like let's solve that first, so to speak. And even outside of blockchain, right? Like, because in some way, like, blockchain has enabled, for me, the biggest contribution of blockchain, some people will say, yeah, like $1 trillion markets, okay? But for me, it's really the fact that it's catapulted cryptography into a space of, advanced research and development that didn't exist before, right? Something that like we saw evolve in AI maybe in like 10, 15 years or 20 years. We've seen in cryptography happen in 5 years, right? Because of the fact that blockchain has sort of given that kind of sandbox, if you wish, or sand square or pay or space, whatever. And I'm very, very keen to continue doing that and exploring that, but I also want to see non-blockchain, advanced cryptography sort of applications and products. One of my kind of favorite companies in that is sort of Cloudflare. I mean, even if they're not doing like very, very edge sort of advanced cryptography, they've deployed some zero knowledge with their privacy pass and other stuff. I think there's others. Maybe Mozilla has been trying, to do some things like that. So you can also see sort of what is the essence of these companies that are really trying to push for these kind of technologies, right? And generally, like it's just a matter of seeing how these products are actually evolving. And for us, in the context of MPC, being kind of this ultimate smoking gun combined with zero knowledge in order to get all the juices of the succinctness and the proofs and whatnot, big identity systems to enter the space of the internet with sort of like layer 0 or layer -1, or I don't even know what it's called anymore, but like kind of the networking layer being fully secure with cryptography, etc., etc. Like this is a very long-term kind of project, but we really only have one chance at this point to make it right. The original goal of the internet was to decentralize, and clearly we needed blockchain to remind us of that. But we cannot lose, vision that blockchain is just one aspect of how we're building products in cryptography, in the technical and digital space. Not everything can be decentralized and shouldn't be decentralized, right?
I have many questions, like after Daniel elaborated his vision. So, for example, what are the major blockers for making cryptography usable, especially in the real world use cases outside blockchain? Is it only the bottleneck in technology? For example, it's not super efficient to use right now.
That's a really good question. I mean, I think there is definitely part of it that is the technology's kind of capacity. I do think we are close enough to say that like that shouldn't be necessarily the excuse. Like it's kind of more of today. I think it's maybe more in the realm of like it's an excuse more than like a real reason. Again, because you can use acceleration through hardware, or you can do more kind of parallelizations. There is definitely tricks that are already there at our like kind of reach. I mean, maybe zero knowledge AI tools are not really ready to hold the capacity of some kind of like open AI style company. That's probably not, that definitely is not an excuse, right? Like that's probably just like the reality of like the capacity of our systems, and that we need more research there. But I do think that the bigger part of just even getting the smaller use cases in, it's both a matter of like literal business needs and interests. Like it's just not necessarily that beneficial for the companies. It doesn't add the kind of extra value for their profit lines, because the users are not necessarily educated in that they need that, right? So people are still using Facebook today and Instagram and every other meta application, social network, and Twitter, while they know that their data is being fully used in sort of, I don't know if for their advantage or disadvantage, right? Like depends on who you are and who you speak to. But the fact that these companies know more about sort of our identity in the digital realm, at least, but like they know more about our identity and our characteristics and the specific traits of our personality than us, it's very scary, right? But people are not fully aware of that, so that's definitely a big blocker. Like, how do we bring that global education? And I think you guys building this podcast is great. I love how much Ingoniama is putting out a lot of content, and companies like ZKV, Validator, and Zero Knowledge podcast as well. Like, there's so many good companies doing this, but we need more. And the truth is that that's, I think, the biggest block. And in the context of the business model, it's really like conscientiating these companies that like we need more integrity in the way that we're building these products. And it starts with recognizing that, profit shouldn't always be the first priority. I know that that's not necessarily a reality in the context of the capitalistic markets that we live in today, but we have the power to change that. A lot of people are changing that, especially, upcoming great companies. We want impact, we want integrity, we want ethical behavior, we want alignment with the values of nature, right? And so that's a big challenge, but I think we can make it. I'm very hopeful and positive, so definitely pushing for that.
Great. So actually, this led to my next question. I've been thinking about how to define the success of the adoption of cryptography. Is it like maybe one day the big giants in Web2 world, they adopt, cryptography to make their products better, or there will be some new products that we haven't seen before being built using cryptography? I don't know. What do you think?
That's a really good question. I don't think I have a clear answer, but when you think about concrete use cases that, let's say, can benefit from cryptography and blockchain, right? Like, let's say supply chain management, right, or tracking. You would think that, like, bringing the solution is enough for everybody to be like, wow, like this actually solves literally every single problem we have in this industry. We wouldn't need to be carrying hundreds of thousands of paper copies for people to sign in different ports and having to track back and spend millions of dollars being able to actually track. Well, it's just like a system. But the key challenge there is usually that the most sort of important or impactful use cases for cryptography in the non-blockchain space, maybe using blockchain, but again, not Web3 space, like traditional industries, ends up being that you need dozens of users to onboard at the same time in order for the system to be useful, right? Like, so many times in these use cases, you don't have a single player that is kind of leading everybody into the next technology. And it's kind of like a kind of soft agreement that happened between the parties in, individual one-on-one kind of contracts and agreements that just form this whole chain of industry. And that's hard to break. That's very hard to break. But, maybe there'll be a point where they just realize that this is the way to go. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's keep dreaming.
Let's see. Yeah. As you said, the space is evolving so fast. So you should definitely come back for another episode. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So
for sure. It's been a pleasure, Queenie.
Thank you. So before we say goodbye, we have one last question that we ask everyone. So name a project you're bullish about.
So I'm gonna say, like, the Worldcoin project. I think there's a lot of sort of skepticism in the industry, and it's probably legitimate skepticism. Like, people are worried about how biometrics can be handled. But since I've started working with them, first of all, I've seen the quality of the team. I mean, these people are not only incredible technologists, but they also really care about the way that the technology is being implemented and the cryptography is being added. And I think, like, it's just amazing to see that they can actually have a meaningful impact in changing that aspect of identity and sort of really differentiating in our current world of between humans and bots or humans and AI, right? Like, it's like a very natural way to do this kind of KYC. I think I'm very bullish about it. I think they have a lot of potential. I hope they continue building in that direction. Maybe a bias because we're working with them, but it's definitely very present for me. I think I've overcome all of my skepticism around the specific challenges, social challenges, and so on. So hopefully that will be proven right.
Great answer. So Daniel, this leads us to the end of this conversation. I think it was great. I learned a lot. So thank you so much, and hope we can bring you again to keep chatting on more things.
I would love that. Feel free to sort of double click or triple click on any of these topics. I'd be happy to share more.
Thank you all.
Let's continue building this industry together. Thank you, Omer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Queenie. We share a few links in the show notes if you guys want to follow the work of Daniel, or you guys want to get in touch with Daniel directly. Be our guest. Thank you all.